Hey, and welcome to State of the Hack. I'm Nick Carr.
And I'm Christopher Glyer.
And we're here with the dark operator, Carlos Perez, and Benjamin Delpy, everyone's favorite tool dev and security guy. We're pumped to have you guys on. We're actually here at DerbyCon. Let's get started.
Yeah, so we thought it'd be cool to have these two on the show. Benjamin, obviously, as everyone is well familiar, obviously he's the author behind
Mimikatz
and Kakao. And actually, Carlos actually taught a really interesting class here on Mimikatz. And so, I guess welcome to the show. And
we want to talk a little bit about that class, or what you've found exploring Mimikatz. Maybe some of your tools that people are less familiar with, or your process behind it. But we tend to start by giving a little bit of background of what your path to where you are at right now is, what your journey in InfoSec is.
Oh wow, my journey in InfoSec. Do you want to go first?
Or maybe how you got started.
Yeah.
In InfoSec, I think that everything started back in 1998. I actually started working for the local government, and it turned out that I was kind of good on the security side, so they sent me to a conference out in Florida. And I took this training. I saw the presenter all of a sudden being able to get shells on all of the AEX servers in Unix. And I'm like, oh, that is so awesome. Then I got back to work and started just going there's this thing called penetration testing. We should try to make sure our stuff is secure. And I had a very good manager who actually gave me approval, and I started owning all kinds of Solaris systems, NDS systems, NT 3.5, and NT4 systems. And I got hooked into security, and I've been doing security ever since. So it was government, Digital Compact, Microsoft, HP. Then I spent 10 years after HP as the director of reverse engineering and integrations at Tenable, and now I'm at TrustedSec as the research lead.
Nice. I feel like it's interesting to get your start working with the governments. I know you do a lot. We run into a lot of government guys who you've trained.
Yeah.
You're big on the training and working with those guys, so it's pretty cool. How about you?
About me. In fact, I was not an InfoSec guy at the beginning. I was a system guy, curious of everything. I think it's 10 years ago, so I feel old, but it was a magical world. We've seen pass the hash, we've seen some hack in all parts, but I wanted to use these tools, but I wanted to understand them. So I started to code my tools to make exactly the same thing for the beginning, because we want to copy to understand at the beginning. And after that, original tools was limited, so I wanted to create new tools for new way to explore Windows security. It was not Mimikatz, the name at the beginning. It was other technical names that we want to forget now. But I was quickly aware to export clear text password on Windows. But all of that started in 2011 for password. Just before, I was able to export private key, non-exportable private key of Windows. But I don't start to create hack tool or security tools. I just started because I wanted to understand how to make that, or if it is possible. And the only way to know if it's possible is not the theory. You have to code it. You have to understand it.
Yep.
And I don't want to trust people or to trust Microsoft about it. I prefer to open Visual Studio and code few lines just to be sure. And of course, IDEA to open Windows file just to be sure too, of course.
You definitely find a lot of interesting things with the curiosity, and so that's what was so cool about hearing about the training that you recently put on. Taking the time to rip apart some of the maybe lesser known capabilities. Mimikatz. You want to talk about any of the things that you've found?
Sure. Or it's people don't understand that Mimikatz itself has been 10-year journey for you writing this tool. So at the beginning, I remember talking with multiple friends of mine. Will Schroeder from SpectreOps, I was talking with him, and I was telling him, hey, I've been teaching now PowerShell security classes now for almost 7 years. I want something different. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do one on Mimikatz. I think that would be cool, because I was doing at work all of this Kerberos stack stuff. And I went I think I have more than enough material for 2 days. I probably have to stretch it out a bit. I was so wrong. I start digging into the code and looking at all the modules, all of the commands, all of the options. And I was going wow, there's this command with this option that does this other command that does this. Let me Google search it. And the only hits were the source code. And like, what? And then other hits were only a GIF that you put out in Twitter, and I'm blowing out the GIF and trying to understand what are these steps that you're doing. And the funny thing is that it has like 6, 7 likes, but most people didn't understand what he was doing. But since I'm looking at the source code and looking at the GIF, I'm like, okay, I'm matching 1 to 1.
Well, that's a really neat way, in a sense, to encourage other people to be curious like you, maybe, right? It's like, I can do this.
Oh, yes.
And you're going to have to dig and understand it a little bit.
In fact, I'm lazy, so I don't like to write documentations. But in fact, I'm not lazy because I code, but I prefer to code, and I think it's a better investment, at least for me, of course, to code new stuff and to explore new stuff than to write documentations. Yeah. And if I write the documentation, people will use it without understand exactly how it works, and I don't like that at all. Oh, yes. I really prefer to make exactly like say Carlos, magical gift on Twitter. Say, in fact, each screenshot is very accurate, very there is all information needed in one screenshot or two sometimes, and there is the source code. And with that, it's enough even for me. I'm very often on Twitter to make a search from Gentil Kiwi, my own command, just to find, yes, it was my screenshot. Okay, I made like this.
That's a really interesting way, though, to tackle the barrier to entry for people that are obviously using it and don't understand it.
Yes, so I don't understand myself, so I can understand this point of view.
And it's actually simplified it, because before all of the comments used to be in French, and the messages used to be in French. The variables were in French with accented characters, and all of a sudden, if you look at because I had to go through the commit history. So as I'm going and looking at it, I'm going like, Google Translate, Google Translate again. Oh, that's what he's doing. That's the message. And now he's translating a lot of that stuff to English, which really makes it. It's still painful, but it still makes it a lot easier.
So, what are some things that maybe from either of you, some of the things that you're like Mimikatz or Kakao can do that people are maybe less aware of, or that's been fun, or anything you found in the
fun?
I mean, I'm interested in some of the NFC and smart card stuff. Yes. Just I have less experience with that.
In fact, all the scripts KDs that use Mimikatz, or even advanced groups, use or embed Mimikatz as is. They haven't neither refactor it. It's very strange, but they use it for dump clear text passwords like 8 years old. Sometimes they also dump NTLM hash, but they are very advanced when they make that. Come on, we spoke about technology about 10 or 20 years old. They only make that. So it's cool for defense side. Obviously, they only use that. But if they will use golden ticket, silver ticket, DP API stuff, magical DP API key, if they will use delegations, there is so many advanced stuff. If one day maybe they will understand how to create smart cards with Mimikatz or Kakao, or to make on-the-fly certificate, invisible certificate on the networks. They will use DC Sync to synchronize the Active Directory on the side. And there is, which is very less known, there is an NFC module, because I'm very fan of the Proxmark to make NFC test. Yeah. But it's expensive, and it's very,
thing in my list.
And it's very advanced. So for very basic stuff, there is also an NFC module in Mimikatz, and you can create some smart cards with Mimikatz. Not smart card, in fact, access card to some building.
Building access cards, yes.
Yes, especially in US, because this is low frequency very often. So this is already embedded in Mimikatz, and you can create your own access card in Mimikatz.
And this is small tokens also, which don't look like a square white
It's like the ultimate Swiss Army knife in terms of in terms of tools.
And there is also all the PKI stuff, which is very crazy. The PKI is, even without hacking, even without Mimikatz, when you know how PKI is working, you're nearly a god. Because you spoke about cryptography, you spoke about even some management, how things are working, how do you delegate creation for people, how you revoke stuff. It's very complicated.
I know that, to be able to communicate with DCA.
Yes, all the communication with certificate authority, all the legislation around the PKI in the normal world, it's very complicated to make it work in very big enterprise. But on the hacking side, it's very easy. It's only very low-level cryptography. It's a certificate, it's an authority, the authority signs the certificate, it's trusted, and normal time you can use it to log on Windows. So if you masterize the certificate authority, you can be everyone on the networks. And if you have certificate authority exported, you can duplicate your PKIs and you can be everyone. And if you know exactly the Microsoft protocol about PKI, the MS IKE about that, you can even ask the NTLM hash of every user if you have the certificate just by Kerberos protocol. So if you create a fake certificate for a domain administrator, you can ask the NTLM hash of the domain administrator only with the Kerberos protocol. It's very magic. It's invisible on the networks. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, and that's when they enabled Diffie-Hellman, and all of a sudden, the Kerberos started and says like, oh, now you have to include the key, and the key is now encrypted. And I remember I did that presentation. I was looking at it and we're like, oh, really? I was quickly going and doing PCAPs and doing stuff, and like, oh, the key's not encrypted. Oh, and then that goes back to the level of friction. Many red teamers don't like friction. They just want their clicky tools. Like many do not learn the insights and outs, and that's one of the things that my team actually does at TrustedSec is we help the red teamer build out their playbooks and all of their tradecraft so they understand stuff better. That's why I actually started looking inside of Mimikatz. I remember I started actually writing this class in January, and in February I started playing with the RPC remote control of Mimikatz. You can run Mimikatz as a server and a machine, and you can control it via RPC. And I told my guys in the Slack, and they're going like, "You can do that?" And they're like, "Yes." And then
there's a GIF for it somewhere.
Yeah. Oh no. Here's the best story about the GIF. He does a GIF on it. I'm looking at the GIF, and he strategically places a Wireshark screen in the background. And I'm looking at the Wireshark screen, and I see 445 as the communication. I'm like, that's SMB. But when I'm using Mimikatz to communicate to the server, everything's 135 RPC. And I'm like, it doesn't fit. Why did he put that? He strategically placed that Wireshark window in the background. I'm texting him, and he says, have you tried Impacket? And I'm like, no. So I go into Impacket, and Impacket actually has a demo or a sample that actually lets you control Mimikatz remotely via RPC. And I'm waiting for 135, and when I bring it up and run it, oh no, now you're controlling Mimikatz remotely via SMB2. And I'm going like, oh. And that's one of the things, the hidden gems that he puts inside of Mimikatz.
Yeah, here you put all the, everyone should take a look at these. I'm going to go take a look at the GIFs a little bit closer now too, just to find the gems.
So when you're doing your research, like, do you just read like the RFC about Kerberos? Like, if you're trying to dive into either a new topic or like, how does that work, or what do you do there?
In fact, at the beginning, I was young. So I was not able to understand all the RFC because this is very theory stuff, and I prefer to code. So I was not able to understand RFC about Kerberos, even Microsoft Open specification, which was not very good at the time. It's very good now, but at the time it was not very open, not very specification, and with a lot of bugs, more or less voluntary. So it was very difficult, and you can't trust only the documentation. So I prefer to open Microsoft files, Kerberos.dll or SAME service server DLL in IDEA, just to understand how it works step by step, by debug, by patching memory, some stuff for magical.
Yep.
And when I understand how Microsoft works, then I try to understand the RFC, which is very true for the Kerberos stuff, because Microsoft extended Kerberos a lot.
Quite a bit.
And very often, I think this is the most active participation on the Kerberos RFC at these times. So first, their code, their understanding about the Kerberos, because if I understand the theory of Kerberos but nobody implemented, why I care about it?
Yeah.
I prefer to care about Microsoft protocol in the real world. So first I reverse the DLL. Second, I code something that looks like exactly like the DLL to make some interface with that. And ultimately, I try to read again the RFC to say, hey, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe the RFC is not enough, but I tend to understand the RFC or the Microsoft Open specification. It was exactly the same for TSP-KG, CreateSSP, and stuff like that.
Oh, yes.
First reversed, then documentation. And you make a mix at the end for coding. It works at the end.
And which mod or which capability or module would you say? I mean, there's so many, but when you actually got it to work or came up with an idea, like which one was the most like mind blowing to you, or like surprising, or I don't know. I don't know if it was the golden ticket or skeleton key or.
I don't understand the question.
Is there anything that you found while doing your research that was the most fascinating to you or most surprising capability that you added in?
The most surprising capabilities, in fact, was both Kerber's golden tickets, because at the end, because of the master Kerber's key, I was able to manipulate fields that is normally impossible to manipulate, because normally only the domain controller technically moves this data. So it can. I don't make a publication about it, but in older Windows version, I have some blue screen with some golden tickets. Because there is some null fields, it's impossible in the real life, but because I was able to forge the tickets, it was very dangerous. And it gave the silver ticket, which is more dangerous, in fact. The Kerberos stuff also is very surprising, because when you understand exactly how the protocol is working, then you can try to make some adjustments. Oh, the protocol says that, but what it will give if I make this borderline stuff. But it is research, I don't know, because in fact it's only the implementation of a normal protocol which is documented, in fact. And I'm just borderline of all this protocol, like the DC sync. DC sync is very magic, it's synchronized about the Active Directory. Yes, but it's documented by Microsoft.
Right.
That's normal. So
right. We've had I remember first running into the golden ticket attacks, the right. No Easy Breach APT 29 investigation. And it's interesting to kind of have to read up and learn so much so quickly, because we saw like 1.krb, we were able to snap it up on disk. Like, what is this?
Yeah, what is this KRB file like?
And I just didn't have much experience understanding Kerberos, and it's kind of.
Well, and then trying to figure out how to recover from it from a defensive perspective.
Yes.
You know, then like frantically like, okay, well, what does this mean? How do we, like, because I think you had documented it and released it, and maybe this was like 2 months later. That we saw it, but we haven't really seen it much since. It's pretty rare. Well, it's super hard to find from a technical perspective, just because.
I think the enterprise-wide remediation for it, for a network of that scale, I think was like, we were trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
And luckily some great stuff was put out around that time also from like Sean Metcalf and stuff like that to help people understand it. But
and then you have silver tickets where are even more dangerous.
Yes.
Because with the silver ticket, you don't have a TGT. With a TGT, when you're connecting to the target host, you're still having to go to the KDC. So there's still a log that you can find.
It's validating, yeah.
In
not really, but it makes logs.
Yeah.
On traffic.
Well, it's got to validate that that it's a valid ticket.
For the first 20 minutes, it's not validated at all.
Exactly.
Nice.
And it doesn't validate the pack. You still need to enable pack validation. And I talk with the KDC, I get my TGS to the service that I want, and now I just pass my TGS to the client, and any other logs are in the client, but most people don't look for Kerberos logs on the client. Now if I have a silver ticket is a forged TGS. I don't have to talk with the KDC. So when you look at most organizations, when they're
TGS
I just had the TGS give me access to the service, and that works very, very nice for persistence. Because if I lose persistence and my TGS is long enough, I can reconnect. But since most SIMs and everything's looking for logs from the domain controllers and not pulling them for the client, because it's like drinking water from the fire hose.
Right, super high volume. Even for domain controllers, it's high volume.
Exactly. So they type to trim it out. More than likely, you're just going under the radar with that silver ticket as you're regaining access to those services.
What's the longest duration you can set a silver ticket? I know golden ticket you can set for 10 years.
No, but the golden ticket is like a buzzword, and that's why it's very well known by everyone. For everyone, golden ticket is domain admin for 10 years. But you can do exactly what you want. There is arguments. For me, I don't want to be domain admin. Domain admin is supervisor. Domain admin, there is some triggers, some alerts.
Yeah.
Usually I quit golden ticket to be a domain controller, by example. It's enough for me. And
The machine account.
Yes, and it's enough for me. And I want it to be for 5 minutes if I want, not 10 years. And if I want to make 100 years, I can, but I don't care about why I made 10 years. The story is very simple. It's very hard mathematically to add some days, some months, because of the hours, because of the shift. Okay, so I have a field, it was 10 hours. Oh, fuck. 10 years will be good. Yeah. But that was not the goal, to make a ticket for 10 years.
And this is where you see about red teamers and pen testers knowing their tools.
Right.
They leave those 10 years as their default, as they're building all this stuff. They're not thinking strategically. They're just going like, oh, this is the default, this is the minimum amount of switches. I don't want to type so many switches.
Well, I
don't want to pull
think
the
it's cool
policy.
too. Like I think a lot of people might not know that you have like a Yara rule, a set of Yara rules as well on your repository for detecting Mimikatz in memory, and just I think a lot of that is neat.
He also has a Splunk rule for DC Sync and DC Shadow.
Yes, I've posted, because I've seen that years after DC Sync is old, and I've seen the command SOC, they suck to detect this kind of attack, and it's very basic, because even default log on recent Windows DC is aware about DC Sync. Say, fuck, this is very easy, but nobody implement it. So, okay. This is a Splunk rule that will detect DC Sync, that will detect DC Shadow, and that will say the original IP address. Come on, just adapt this rule to your environment.
I loved your tweet, like, why are you complaining so hard? If I can do it, you should have been able to do it. And he then puts a link to the gist of the Splunk rule.
I'm not a Splunk expert, especially on the rule part, but it's very easy, exactly like what I described yesterday. Say, okay, I flush the log, I made my attack. Oh, there is some event. Okay, let's try this event. Again the attack. Okay, I will create a rule about that. That's all. It's exactly the same things for everything I code, in fact. And when you know the source code, especially on the Kikyo, you know I put a lot of magical value in the code that say, hey, this number is never change at all. Maybe it's a ticket from Benjamin, so it's very easy to trap. Yeah. And there are things like this in every module, in fact. So I have a Yara rules. I put some.
Maybe people are looking for a little Kiwi ASCII art.
Yes, I've seen that.
It sucks. I've made, I think, perfect Yara rules that detect even some advanced attack that implement stuff like me. It detected. I've tested about the Olympic Games samples. It detected as is, so it was not a problem. I've made some Splunk rules. I've made some magical values inside. And during these times, we have security editors that want to implement machine learning and artificial intelligence, and they suck to detect this kind of attacks. Come on. Just listen to the rules that I've put on my repository and start to make bad advertising. So.
I think one reason, at least from an attacker's perspective, why you might want to set a longer, whether it's a silver or golden ticket, at least one, I guess, nice advantage is if a victim does remediate and say they do a password change, unless they're specifically thinking about, well, if somebody has created a ticket and how do I roll the ticket KRB TGT twice, that ticket will still be valid.
Yep.
And so you could come back in a month later, or 6 months later, or a year later.
Yes, but you can create another one too. In fact, you don't need to create a very long ticket. On my side, by example, I prefer to create a very fake ticket with impossible character, which is not valid at all. But for the first 20 minutes, it will be valid. So I will create new ticket every 20 minutes. I don't need 10 years.
Yep. And also, it's all about being professional from the attacker side point of view. Thinking from the red team, as I'm building tools for a red team. One of the things that you're going to see is that the controls that you find in an environment, once you determine what are the controls they have implemented, what are their patterns of life, that's going to give you two key things. One of them is what tool, it's going to limit what tools can you use, and it's going to limit your tempo. How fast can you move in that environment? And those two things become key in knowing what techniques can you use. For example, you're talking about persistence with the golden ticket. In this case, it's going every 20 minutes. But I can probably lose access to that network, let's say for a month, and then regain it, but I still want that access back. There are other methods like using that Kerberos ticket to then change the password of a user and not create any logs, or leverage something like DC Shadow and be able to modify ACLs in multiple places. Now with my other, and chain it with that account that I changed the password for, which is a low level, but through the ACLs in the GPOs or the ACLs on the objects, I can then turn that account into a domain admin. So it's just thinking a bit further and be more strategic. There's one of the Murphy's laws of combat is that the professionals are predictable, but the world's full of amateurs. That is what we're seeing here. There's a lot of amateur attackers out there that just simply go with those defaults, they just go with the 10-year tickets, and they're not thinking a bit more deeply into their tradecraft and thinking stuff like that. That's why when I do my training, I'm doing all the technical stuff, and then I'll pause and I'll do a story. And some of these stories are fake, some of the stories are real based on operations that we do, but those stories actually provide context because I want students to think outside the box, both blue teamers and red teamers, because red teamers then go, how do you call the things that you put on horses so they can
Blinders.
look? Blinders. So I want to remove those blinders from them.
Yeah.
I want them to not go like, oh, it has to be those 10 years, that feel of 10 years in a ticket. So I bring over the events in the event log, I bring Sysmon, and I highlight special fields and then compare them. What do you see different from this one to this one? And something as simple as the case of the words are completely different when you craft your own TGT or your own TGS, and they're going like, oh, and you see that light bulb go in their heads like, oh, there's more than the time fields and the type of encryption field. Oh, now I get it.
And in your class, you teach both how to use the tool in the different modules, but then also
Yes.
the like defensive side in terms of
Oh yeah,
how you might.
after each module, there's one section which is operational guidance for red teamers, and then the other one is just tables and tables of all the different IOCs for each of one of the different commands and combinations, and even sometimes I even cover some modifications. Like for example, sadly many blue teamers just go like with the static access mask for Sysmon and go like, you know that I can go into the source code, modify this, just to have the bare minimum access mask that I need to do my task, and now that's no longer valid. Now you need to switch how you build your Sysmon tools, and I tell them you should cover all of this stuff in Sysmon, so you can cover, because I want them to understand the attack, understand the variations, so they can look for those variations. So now they're not looking for the amateur, they're looking for the professional, because the professional is going to be predictable. He's going to modify that code.
Right.
So you have to think, how is he going to do it? If you cover the professional, the amateur is just going to be like shooting fish in a barrel. It's just going to be easy if you put that extra work to focus on the professional.
It's pretty neat. The so you have coming up pretty soon. Are you going to teach a class anywhere else, or what's?
Yeah. It seems that I'm going to be teaching it at Troopers in Germany, based on comments from a good friend of mine.
I hear FireEye's flying us there and
Yeah.
paying for it for the show.
Oh, awesome.
That'd be cool.
No, we'll make it happen though if we say it here, right?
Yeah.
That'd be good. No, I've heard great things about it. Anything that you're working on?
I prefer not saying about what I'm currently
Sure.
working because I'm lazy. Sometimes I'm working on something and I will finish. It's 6 months later because I was working on Busy Light module or other crazy stuff about printing coffee cup on the console.
Or the NFC module or something like that.
An NFC module that nearly everybody don't know what is it. But was very important, I've heard a lot of very good comment about Carlos' training about that, but one tweet was very significant about how people are thinking. I really want, but I'm a dreamer, but I really want people don't want to understand the tool just by training, just by seeing my presentation or when I speak at conference. Code some things. Open Visual Studio, try to make something by yourself. Don't wait for other people to make the things. Don't forget that Mimikatz is my POC. I'm not a professional coder. I don't like to code. And when you see my code, you see, okay, it's not at all. But don't wait other people, don't wait tools, don't wait Metasploit, Metaperator, other people. We are not allowed to code some things in this area. But everybody can be a coder. I was not able to code before Mimikatz some stuff, so everybody can make that.
Yeah.
So don't wait Carlos' trainings, even if it's very good. Make it by yourself.
Awesome. That's actually, I feel like it's a great note to go out on. So thanks, guys, for joining us.
Thanks for joining
Our
us.
pleasure.
And we'll catch you next time.